Hey everybody, Quentin Claybon. I'll try to keep your attention here through this. So Senator Jagler and committee members, thank you for the opportunity to give testimony in favor of Senate Bill 18, which addresses the critical need to make state test scores and report cards useful, again, after recent revisions by the Department of Public Instruction. Thank you to the many co-sponsoring legislators for prioritizing these essential resources for school boards, legislators, and families. IRG Action Fund is the advocacy and lobbying partner of the Institute for Reforming Government, IRG, a Wisconsin-based think tank that works to give all Wisconsinites an opportunity to prosper. Central to our prosperity is having high-performing schools with high standards and the tools to meet them. So I am a huge sports fan. Get me going on Kirill Kaprizov, Brandon Woodruff, or Igor Swiatek, and I will not stop. But leagues increasingly rely on analytics to gain advantages. And as a numbers nerd, I can say the number that you pick really matters. Take the National Basketball Association. There's a statistic called box plus minus that tries to sum up everything a basketball player does on the court into one number. The ranking that this produces makes a lot of sense at first glance, Giannis Antetokounmpo, LeBron James, until you examine its components. According to defensive box plus minus, do you know who is the best defender in the NBA? It is Nikola Jokic. In fact, he has 3 of the top 10 greatest defensive seasons of all time. If you've never seen Jokic play basketball, his offense is truly marvelous, like watching a 35-year-old dad back down his 10-year-old son in the driveway with weight, sneaky passes, and unreachable jump shots. But if you've seen his defense, it resembles that same father at 45 getting his butt whooped by his son on college break. Concrete feet, low effort, sweaty, and desperate. He is not a great or even good defender. Because of our eye test, as well as compelling competing statistics we have, we know box plus minus is not a useful metric. Furthermore, if Jokic's general manager builds a roster using numbers that call Jokic a great defender, the Nuggets will waste tens of millions of dollars and lose constantly. The changes to the Ford exam, pre-ACT, and ACT fail in the exact same way. Nobody who looks at the new proficiency rates actually believes they are real, that the student performance they purport is actually true. Additionally, if we did act as if they were true, we would squander billions over the years making horrible policy decisions. Take a look at some of the least impoverished school districts in Wisconsin. Does anyone in the room believe 1 in 5 Fox Point students enter Nicolet High School reading below grade level, unable to comprehend Treasure Island or The Wind in the Willows? That is what DPI's results say. Now, my senator, Senator Larson, is a fierce advocate for public school resources, and I appreciate his voice here. If we address poverty and get schools their constitutionally required resources, he would say, we will see students soar. Fox Point cracked $20,000 in spending per student per year and only had 8% economically disadvantaged students. Students are funded superbly and have few stressors at home, as far as we know. Yet DPI says 20% struggle with grade level work despite every advantage. Either DPI scores are way off, or those arguments that adequate funding and solve poverty lead to stellar results are false. Which is it? It cannot be both. Look at Lodi. DPI says 1 in 4 8th graders struggle with mathematics, like 3x minus 1 equals 11. 1 in 4. Do you believe that? Will Senator Kajewski drive home after a vote today thinking, I agree with DPI, 27% of my district's freshmen are not really clear on the Pythagorean theorem. If DPI's changes hold, that is the new truth. Forget college readiness as a standard. 1 in 6 Kohler kids apparently can't read. Look at DPI's own communication. DPI is asking us to believe 2 things simultaneously. Wisconsin had the highest high school graduation rate it has ever had, and that is something to celebrate, invest in, and grow. And I agree. Also, a majority of 11th graders do not meet simple grade level reading standards like cite textual evidence that supports what the text says, explicitly or implicitly, including determining where the text is ambiguous. Those 2 things directly conflict, but they are understandable when DPI believes the first statement, but not the second. Now, of course, nobody is going to make policy decisions based on these numbers because nobody, not school boards, not Democrats, not Republicans, not DPI's Office of Educational Accountability, not Governor Evers, believes them. But if nobody believes them, we ought to roll them back to the numbers that had credibility. But maybe you agree the new results have no relation to either grade level or college readiness, but are still skeptical. Maybe you agree with the standards then Superintendent Evers set, which this bill would restore, but you still want to object to it. Perhaps then it comes down to teachers being involved in this work. Educators led this work, and I trust educators, right? The question I will raise is, did DPI fully trust educators? If you have not read the hundreds of pages DPI transparently uploaded on this summer's setting of test score standards through DRC, I will summarize them, as Director Solon Sotaram did. For each grade, teachers received performance level descriptors written by DPI that said what skills a student would have at developing versus approaching versus meeting versus advanced. They also received forward exam questions arranged from easiest to hardest. Their task was to pick the easiest question a student would get correct at each level. These questions become the borders of those categories and determine the percentage of students in each group. So what is interesting is that the rounds were different. In round 1, teachers set the benchmarks alone and without any way to see what proficiency rates would result. In round 2, teachers saw which questions the other people picked and discussed the choices with each other, then reset their individual benchmarks. And then in round 3, this is the key one, teachers saw what proficiency rates would result, and they saw the 2023 Wisconsin proficiency rates and 2023 proficiency rates, as was mentioned, from Minnesota, Michigan, and Illinois, discussed the choices, then reset the benchmarks. In round 4, one teacher from each grade saw the near final proficiency rates, reviewed descriptors, then tweaked the benchmarks. And then after teachers had finished, DPI adjusted the proficiency rates for each grade so they were close to one another. All changes were within one standard deviation of the scores from round 4, and Superintendent Underly made no changes upon reviewing the final scores. And so if you go back to kind of the green and yellow highlight a couple of pages, if you look at the tables in your packet, you see the rush to 50% occurred during round 3. This is the round in which DPI introduced outside influences to the teachers. I'm quoting the report now. Participants were encouraged to compare the benchmarked impact data with the impact data from their round 1 recommendations. Participants were informed that DPI did not require or necessarily expect the impact data from the recommendations to match any of the benchmarked impact data, but that they should instead use the benchmarked impact data as a reasonability check for what they recommended, for their recommendations. Sorry, I'm quoting. If DPI really trusted teachers to interpret the text of the new standards, why would they let DRC introduce numbers that scared teachers into recanting their previous positions? Even worse, why would they let DRC tell teachers to check our scores against Minnesota's, Michigan's, and Illinois'? DPI's entire argument for altering benchmarks is the gold standard Department of Education NAEP is not suitably matched to Wisconsin standards. Yet, apparently, we should align ourselves, or at least take the suggestions of, what they decided in Lansing and St. Paul. No, if we are going to trust teachers, trust them all the way. What we got instead was a DPI-shifted product. Supporting this bill is not a rejection of teachers, but a rejection of a flawed process that unduly suppressed teachers' real opinions. But it is possible people still want to support scores that fail the eye test and are a distortion of educators' original intent. So what if we just want our reputation back? In all the other respects, Wisconsin DPI puts out the deepest and broadest set of education data in the country. Other states barely have functioning websites. We have teacher turnover rates and flexible analysis of enrollment trends for schools to use. OEA Director Soman Sudaram is on NAEP's actual state policy task force, as she said. But you know how other states know Wisconsin now? Here's Education Next, Harvard University Kennedy School's education journal. Recent moves by Wisconsin and other states to lower the proficiency bar on their tests suggests the importance of public scrutiny of student performance. Here is Education Week, the journalism standard, in a straight news piece, not opinion. Outside of graduation requirements, other states, including Wisconsin, Oklahoma, and Alaska, have lowered the bar to pass state tests over the last few years, a move that critics worry will obscure the academic toll that national indicators have shown the pandemic took on students. I want Wisconsin to have the best schools in America, not a reputation as an easy or inaccurate grader. IRG Action supports SB 18 for those host of reasons. DPI's new standards are lower than the college and career readiness standards students deserve for flourishing, contented lives. DPI's new standards are unusable because they are also not grade level standards, as demonstrated by vastly inaccurate assessments of familiar districts. When setting standards, teachers relied too much on outside data DPI allowed in place of the plain text of the standards and their own experiences in classrooms. Wisconsin is now likened to Oklahoma's similarly tumultuous education department instead of exemplars in Mississippi and Massachusetts. I hope the information provided today is helpful in making the best decision for school boards, parents, and kids. We used to be the best at this. Let's get back to it.
Questions from committee members? Very good. Thank you, sir.